Gunvolt's run through EX Babel was an immense ordeal for me. I've got a million things to say about it, starting with the Siren Room. 333 secret kudos can be claimed by destroying the Siren alongside 2 other enemies. You've got 2 opportunities to do this, once with the 2 floaters, or later with the pair of punch golems. Given the distance between the Siren and the golems, the overly complicated method I conjured up is a ridiculous routine comprising fastidious HP management of the Siren and golems, then timing a painstakingly strict flash field contact double kill while Dragon Sphere cooks the Siren above. Make sure to say a prayer or 10 before pressing the flash field button, because with this method, the game will rather often grant you a triple, but not the secret kudos. Why? Because you, that's why. There's more to detail about the Siren Room, but I'll save that for the Jota fight. For now, I'll shift focus to the densely packed tower climb. Here's a great example of an elaborate crash bolt, dart, and flash field combo. The first 3 enemies are placed conveniently for a stream of darts and crash bolt to create an easy combo, but the roll cannon lurking above complicates matters. In fact, oddly placed roll cannons compose a large portion of this stage's puzzles. Firing 7 darts at the sprinkler, then doing the same to the roll cannon is a consistent solution to that particular conundrum. Now for this enemy pushing extravaganza. Of the 7 enemies littered around these slopes, 5 of them can be packed together before you smite them with the power of Zeus. It could be argued that this is excessively pace-breaking, but when the reward is this lucrative, it leaves me with little choice. The remaining 2 stragglers highlight the importance of knowing your vertical range. You can fall quite far from your target and still get kills with Gunvolt's electricity. This whole farce with another sequestered roll cannon took ages of research, and all I was able to accomplish was a basic 4-strike. Certainly an area I'd look at more extensively for a revision to this run. On that topic, part of my optimization routine for this stage was to begin learning how to incorporate more airstrikes within my combos. Initially, Dragon Sphere saw notably more use than in the final path you see here. While it's undeniably a valuable asset, heavy reliance on it does rob you of kudos gleaned from enemy HP. In particular, tackling pairs of enemies should be done using only the gun whenever possible. This instance of enemy pushing is of questionable value. Using Dragon Sphere and tags there is both faster and more profitable, but I wanted to limit the number of times Gunvolt falls down the tower and has to climb back up. As a vertical stage, EX Babel revels in its crash bolt combos. Enemies are commonly placed in ways that allow you to accrue tons of kudos rapidly. There's no better illustration of that than the lovely group of 4 robots hanging out below the checkpoint. Bizarrely enough, gunning them down to get a 4-strike is both more challenging and less rewarding compared to the positional manipulation I devised. 9 enemies inhabit the section past the checkpoint. Even with the ungodly amount of research I put into this stage, I was unable to find a method of integrating the brush saw into a larger combo, so it ends up being a 2-4-3 split. The enemies to the left blatantly serve as crash bolt fodder, while the sprinklers to the right mandate a Dragon Sphere for a safe triple. Now for an absolute monstrosity of a 4-strike. Believe me when I tell you that the vertical spacing for Crash Bolt here is ludicrously unforgiving. You've got only a few pixels to work with. If you're even slightly off, either the sprinkler or brush saw will escape unharmed. Sneaking a dart past the tall block to hit the lone floater isn't much easier. In any other stage, that combo would be the showstopper, but here, its limelight is stolen by the godforsaken Siren Room. When attempting airstrikes on roll cannons, remember that their HP is rather low, so mash darts quickly to avoid landing only 2 tags before they die. Thankfully, the remaining Dragon Sphere combos are very consistent, even if they appear complex on the surface. I have to give major thanks to Grey XL, whose video on this stage taught me about the 2 floaters hidden above the hexapile. If it wasn't for that knowledge, I would have looked rather silly. For those wondering, letting Gunvolt fall all the way to the checkpoint wastes no in-game time. It's a damn good thing that Jota remains relatively unchanged, avoiding the Carrera treatment of getting buffed into a behemoth of a challenge. The only difference to my eye is that Zero Blade's rift is wider, which changes nothing really, but it's the thought that counts, right? Back to the Siren Room. In GV1, Carrera's stage requires that you destroy the Siren to proceed, whether you zap the floating bombs or not. Here, destroying the golems too early immediately removes the Siren's hitbox. Had a Carrera-style Siren been implemented here, you wouldn't have to worry about timing what I believe to be a near frame-perfect input. Of course, this complaint applies only to the method I used. You want to know the best part? I later discovered that it is in fact possible to push the golems onto the pink platforms and crash bolt them together with the Siren, invalidating my method and rendering all of my ranting completely pointless. What a time to be alive. Altogether, while there's still room for improvement, this run takes a deserved spot on my list of favorite achievements alongside other hellish endeavors like Damageless Ragnarok Core and beating Craft with a water gun. It's a brutal segment, but it marked a turning point for my approach to optimization in this game, and for that, I'm grateful. Copen's flight up the Biblical Tower contains an incredible amount of variety. Constant weapon switching to preserve energy while maintaining speed, precarious climbing across a host of sparsely placed walls and platforms, and 5 GCEX opportunities that are all completely distinct from one another. My whole spiel in Part 1 about Stellar Spark's excellent attributes as a weapon is demonstrated here. Throughout the stage, I use it profusely to diminish the number of intrusive pauses necessary for Copen's energy to recharge. The time savings are substantial enough to grant me the freedom to focus on score optimization, which is exactly what I did by going for the Sprinkler and Brush Saw GCEX first. Recall that it's always prudent to eliminate enemies you can't lock onto as early as possible. There are 2 such instances during this stage, and in both cases, the extra kudos are worth the time expenditure. Seeing as how this is the first stage to feature GCEXs with 3 of Copen's weapons, I'd like to discuss the merits of each. Hailstorm Blade, Twin Tail Bunkers, and Broad Circuit are the trifecta for handling GCEXs, although unlocked Stellar Spark can have situational uses too. Hailstorm Blade covers a wide area, deals solid damage to most enemies, and has superlative speed. These traits allow Copen to zip through the air and keep prolonged GCEX chains alive. It's also the only weapon that can reliably get multiple aerial EX bonuses during the GCEX, although that's still dependent on the specific enemy formation you're engaging. Broad Circuit is a ranged powerhouse, acting as a sniper-type weapon. Its strength doesn't abate with distance, so provided that you aim the locked variant with finesse, you can send immense firepower downrange and cause instant carnage to any foes unfortunate enough to find themselves in Copen's crosshairs. It should generally be fairly obvious when the level designers intend for Broad Circuit's use in a GCEX. The formation with 2 sprinklers that just pass by is a great example, with the diagonal line of enemies and the obtrusive block preventing any other weapon from being effective. It would be negligent to not acknowledge it, so a brief pause of the discussion to enjoy this delectable Hailstorm Blade GCEX. It's a sterling example of the Icy Blade's penchant for acquiring multiple locked kills during a chain. Twin Tail Bunkers serves as the opposite of Broad Circuit, obliterating anything at close to medium range. The weapon specializes in attacking clustered groups of tanky foes by leveraging the indispensable ability to manually aim its large piercing drills, all while the homing projectiles target a different enemy, typically the one responsible for shooting a physical projectile at Copen. The effective range of the main drills can be extended by bullet dashing along the same direction as the attack. Naturally, Twin Tail Bunkers is your go-to for GCEXs involving brush saws, as seen at the beginning of the stage. The first instance of Copen faring worse than Gunvolt against a boss belongs to Jota, whose illusory magician shtick is wholly antithetical to Copen's tagging system. Luminous Rain is Jota's most dangerous move, not because of the attack itself, but because tagging him as he places the drones around the arena is essentially gambling. The time limit is pressing enough to justify taking the risk, but be mentally prepared to lose the run every time you do it. Flash Stinger requires care to avoid damage. There's a narrow window present where Copen can safely dash forward for a tag. You won't see it here, but to my knowledge, it's impossible to tag Jota during Judgment Ray, leaving a Reload Crush Temper Tantrum as your only option for offense. Calamity Ripper is the only freebie you're given, so enjoy the breather whenever it presents itself. Zero Blade's Rift may be relatively narrow here, but don't be fooled. This version is far more fearsome than Gunvolt's. Copen's lasers don't stymie Jota's charge, so you have to squeeze a horizontal bullet dash between Jota and the Rift. It's not the most precise thing in the world. Thankfully, I never lost an attempt threading the needle, but it does warrant practice. Don't ask me what the hell the finish to this fight was, other than perhaps serving as a piece of evidence toward the existence of God. Avarice didn't bite me in the ass this time, but it's questionable if the 19 extra kudos was worth the heart attack. This crossover between Resident Evil and Castlevania is a puzzle solver's dream. What makes this stage quite enjoyable is that it lacks the need for soul-crushing precision. Everything you see here can be replicated fairly reliably. It's just that the process of defining the solutions to these brain twisters takes an eternity. This is where I'd include more complaints about the non-functional checkpoints, but there are none prior to Elise. To call this stage creative would be an understatement. It's hilarious that pushing multiple enemies down flights of stairs is a genuine strategy. Dragon Sphere, Crash Bolt, and just plain mowing down enemies with your gun all see profuse application. Furthermore, the Iron Maidens strewn about are used ingeniously by the level designers. Not only are they an active threat, complicating your journey while you seek to increase your score, but they also act as signposts for where exactly you need to place Gunvolt while arranging combos. Chances are, if there's a coffin near a group of enemies, that particular spot is vital to solving whatever riddle you're facing. This brings me to the Blood Familiars, which I'll refer to as zombies for simplicity's sake. These initially purple fellows either try to jump scare you by breaking out of Iron Maidens, or they employ the Kiryu school of thought and violently burst through a window before assaulting you. Paradoxically, the zombies are more accurate at tracking Gunvolt than other enemies with supposedly functioning brains. Up to a certain threshold, they attempt to maintain as close a distance as they can, even while off-camera. Furthermore, upon being shocked by the flash field, they become enraged and shift to a bright orange color, gaining movement speed. These traits make the zombies dependable for constructing ornate, high-scoring combos. There's an upcoming triple featuring a floater that deserves special mention. I'm not sure if I missed whatever grand plan the designers had for this guy, but the best option I found in terms of score was to corral the grenade launchers into a corner, lure the Iron Maiden into closing, and then drop down to tag the secluded robot before escaping with a skill jump. It's unquestionably the most technical combo in the stage, and it takes a while to set up, which flows nicely into the next issue, the time limit. Up until this point, I've comfortably met the par time set for each stage. You're given 5 minutes to trudge through the gloomy corridors. However, while this iteration of Mysterious Manor might be physically small, squeezing out as many kudos as possible is more time-consuming here than in the prior stages. During the research phase, I found that my route was about 5 seconds too slow, and that was with a generous pattern from Elise. I figured that I'd need about a 10-second buffer to account for Elise's RNG. so my task became to save 15 seconds without sacrificing the core components or entertainment value of my route, which is easier said than done. In the end, I successfully modified several combos to be appreciably faster, losing only 15 to 30 kudos, all of which comes from dealing less damage to enemies rather than foregoing an airstrike or something of that nature. My favorite Eureka moment belongs to the second to last combo prior to the shutter, featuring an obtusely placed Eden soldier trapped in solitary confinement. It's impossible to incorporate him into the blatantly obvious Crash Bolt combo below, which leaves only the soldier and zombie stationed above as potential friends for our lone wolf. This is where the brilliance of the zombie's behavior shines. Push the top soldier into the pit and pursue. Then, corner the new best friends and align their horizontal positions. They both favor jumping melee attacks over shooting, and they've got just enough hops to climb up the conspicuous platforms adorning the left wall. Once in place, you can zap them with a satisfying Crash Bolt alongside the zombie, whose amorous tracking of Gunvolt proves fatal. It's possible to save time by wall jumping around the bottom floater in this stack of 4, but I found that tactic less than reliable. Even if you avoid contact damage, gaining enough height for Crash Bolt to hit all of them isn't consistent. You do get a few more kudos via flash field contact by taking the slower method, so it's a better choice in the end. I didn't put too much effort into the last combo either. There might be a faster way to deal with a buffoon that attempts an ambush, but I chose to prioritize safety. Elise isn't difficult in the traditional sense. Her moves pose no real threat on their own. It's only when you specifically vie for speed that you're prone to making mistakes with EP and tag management. As a general rule, a 2-1 tag split is the optimal approach, but I switched to a 3-tag approach during the last phase for granular control over her HP. Embarrassingly enough, I did flub one attempt here, but she did give me a god-awful pattern during that fight, so there's no guarantee I would have cleared the time limit anyway. In this case, a good pattern constitutes Elise using a move where she switches sides as soon as you've depleted her health to Crash Bolt kill range. She was less than cooperative here, stalling with repeated kunai throws and Gorgon Gaze, nearly robbing me of a successful run and robbing you of witnessing a stylish Crash Bolt finish. Here's the most interesting ranking screen in the run. Remember what I said about needing a buffer to weather bad luck from Elise? Well, check out that timer. 3/4 of a second off from being unceremoniously punched in the gut and sent back to the start. The Mysterious Manor is tailored toward giving Copen's default weapon the spotlight. Like Gunvolt, Copen's secret kudos involve shattering every window within the manor. Unlike Gunvolt, doing so is a considerably clunkier process that demands a more thoughtful approach. Long chains of windows are fodder for unlocked Stellar Spark, whereas lone or small groups of windows can be cleared by locking onto nearby enemies. The water section that just passed, which I'm convinced is a Symphony of the Night reference, is an excellent summary of this stage's flow. Most enemies are spaced such that Stellar Spark is the dominant choice for speed and efficiency, but a few enemy clusters do call for Hailstorm Blade's brisk slices. The zombies are somewhat resistant to Stellar Spark, so cutting them down can preserve weapon energy. This gauntlet is pretty eventful. You've got enough energy to afford 2 slices of Hailstorm Blade, along with a helping of Stellar Spark for the first Fire Golem. However, this leaves you with scant energy for the second Golem, which paves the way for Hydro Zapper to make its first appearance. Now you might be thinking that, aside from the window-breaking shenanigans, this seems fairly straightforward so far. Well, allow me to interrupt this leisurely jaunt with some of Inti Create's trademark sadism, courtesy of not 1, but 2 GCEX setups that involve keeping Copen afloat above a giant bottomless pit. Let's go down the list. 1. Managing Copen's flight in this scenario is a touchy procedure. Many fumbles were had where Copen flew directly into the depths of hell at Mach 5. 2. Learning how to angle broad circuit feels like a decades-long task. 3. In case the prior 2 slaps hadn't left your face sore, Inti decided to add a jumping Eden soldier to the first GCEX. Learning a consistent method of manipulating his path is possible, but the journey to enlightenment is unpleasant. Even with that troublesome portion finished, these halls and staircases aren't exactly a cakewalk. There are numerous little movement-related quirks that can trip you up and end a run even after you've aced the GCEXs. Don't ask me how I know. I'd say that the principal issue arises when dealing with the wannabe Batmen directly after the bottomless pit. They fall from the ceiling based on proximity, so keep your eyes peeled and fly accordingly. The last set of windows prior to the shutter deserves special attention. Dealing excess damage to the zombies and soldier nearby presents a tangible threat to the run if you're careless with your positioning while using unlocked Stellar Spark. And now, I present to you even more enemies lurking above the abyss. This GCEX setup requires just as much experimentation as the others, especially if you want 80 kudos from the sprinkler, but at least it's a lot easier to practice the flight routine. One last hidden soldier, and it's off to visit Elise. Don't let this specific pain-free attempt fool you. Optimizing Copen's fight versus Elise is a major headache. If you want to avoid wasting time stomping a ceaseless army of snakes into oblivion, then Copen must stay airborne. While his shield does offer automatic defense against kunai, a tiny mishap with your positioning and bullet dashes will result in failure. Phase 1 is no big deal since Elise's only attacks are to throw kunai and switch sides, but things get dicey when her other moves come into play. Particularly harrowing is the scenario in which Copen is up high in the air when Elise uses her petrifying beams, so I'm quite fortunate to have avoided that situation here. Unfortunately, I lost 3 run attempts as good as this one to Elise, which motivated me to study the battle a lot more than I initially thought was necessary. Sure, slowing down a tad and focusing on safety over offense probably would have avoided the heartache. But given all the things I've put myself through in this part alone, is it any surprise I wound up taking the greedy approach?